So who's a Garmin expert?
Well, I'm not going to claim to be a Garmin expert. I'm going to claim that I've done a lot of route planning using Base Camp and Garmin products, and so the reason for this discussion is just to convey some of the things that I've learned over time, and just to provide some comment. When we get to the end, obviously, I'm sure that all of you can provide some tips and tricks for everybody else as well. And so when we get to the end, we'll kind of talk through those kinds of things as well.
Hey, Jim?
Yes, sir.
We got to change your screensaver, man. I'm sick of that white stuff.
Let's
I
see if
can't find my
something better.
Garmin.
Is that better?
One. I can't find my Garmin. I just might have tossed it.
Better.
That's still got snow in it. Let's see if I can find something better.
There's the lift bridge in it now.
Guess I'm in a snowy theme.
Release there, the ice is going up.
There we go.
Oh, nice car.
Been sitting in my wife's aunt's yard like that for 40 years. Okay, so everyone is, so I got to let 2 more people in here.
So Jim, I got a question for you.
Yes, sir.
Because my old Garmin, I think I can't find it, so I think I might have just tossed it. Because every time I was using it, it would always say, get off the freeway and go through the city.
Okay.
I'm trying to, like, coming back from Chicago, fastest route, it says, get off and go through the city. And it's all it did.
You set now?
So,
And I sent it in the Garmin twice, and they sent it back, and they said they don't know what the problem is. But it always take you off to the city routes.
interesting. Usually that would only work if you have the profile set up to avoid highways. But
Well, I did. Well, it worked fine until I put it in that mode. Well, then I couldn't get out of that mode.
Really?
And Garmin said, we don't know what's wrong with it. They even had it when I sent it back.
Wow, that's kind of funky.
So if I'm looking for a Garmin, I've talked to Frank a little bit, but because there's no Garmins that really speak to you, are they, you know?
Well, there's a couple of just Garmin's in general. There's kind of 2 classifications of it. You know, there's the car one,
Let's go play or something.
and then there's the motorcycle
What
one,
you guys go play?
Zoomos and things like that. And but as far as I know, there's none of them that actually plug into the Goldwing's audio that I'm aware of.
I can hear you.
The only one that still plugs into the Goldwing audio is if you get a 595. They still have a few of those. All the other ones are going Bluetooth.
Okay.
Well, for the old 1500s, if they go Bluetooth, can we make that work?
Only if you get a dongle. And you're going to spend a lot of money for that, at least for the ones I've seen.
Okay, so we're gonna kind of get this thing started. I'm gonna mute all of you guys just because that way you guys can hear conversations in the background, and then I'll start recording this particular presentation, and then we'll kind of start and we'll see where we go from there. Let's see if I can figure out how to record.
Hey, Jim,
Yep, I got it.
I'm recording it already, so.
Oh, you are? Okay, there we go. All righty, so what we're going to talk about today is Garmin Base Camp and some things that go along with Garmin Base Camp, and kind of working on some of how to do route planning. Now, the first thing to talk about is why Base Camp. Base Camp is free. Base Camp works with Garmin devices very well. It is not considered one of the best mapping and routing pieces of software out there. Some would consider it terrible. And there are certain things that it does badly, but you can work around. And we'll cover those kinds of things. Again, I do not claim, or what I'm claiming, going to show you is some tips and tricks that I've learned and how to make things work a little bit better within Basecamp. And then we'll, at the end, we'll have kind of an open conversation a little bit, and people can also provide some feedback as well. So the first thing that I want to talk about is, and I just realized that I forgot to bring up a picture that I meant to bring up. Sorry. And I don't. My apologies, I meant to. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about as well is Garmin Express. So Garmin Express is what you use now to update your devices. And when you're in Garmin Express, you've got the updates available. You want to make sure to click this View Details button, because then what that'll do is that'll give you the options, and what you want to make sure to do is you want to update your maps on your computer and your device, both. Because then that means that those maps will be available for Basecamp. Otherwise, the base maps that comes with Basecamp are pretty much useless. And so this is the way where you can make use of your maps off your device, in addition to being able to use them on your device. And you want to make sure to make sure to add it to this. And then that way, once you install it on your computer as well, then Basecamp will find those maps in addition to the base map that comes with it. So I'm going to open it. I've got Basecamp open here. But one of the things that I want to show you that is, I think, one of the things that is kind of a hidden good feature of Basecamp is the ability to create multiple databases. Now, keeping in mind that a database, as far as Basecamp is concerned, is actually a folder. But if you do File or Edit Preference Options, and you go to General, there's this option right here, which is a Database Options. And so what you can do, and what I would recommend is usually, is you go to a folder that's on a shared service like OneDrive or Dropbox or iCloud or any of these shared services. I use Dropbox because then I create a folder out here. I did not mean to do shortcut, sorry. And just for the heck of it, I'm going to call this folder Chapter Q, just because it's just where I'm at. So what happens is you create this folder in this shared resource, in the shared thing, or this cloud-based thing that you can then share with other devices. Now, for me specifically, I have it so I can then open up Basecamp on my main computer system, make my routes, and then it saves it into Dropbox. And then I can open up Basecamp on my laptop, and I now have all the routes that I had at my home computer on my laptop for when I'm off and off and remote, and then I'm on a trip, and then I make changes to a route. It saves it into Dropbox, and then when I come back to my home computer, all those changes exist and are there. So I created a folder called Chapter Q. So then what I want to do is create a new database. Database name is going to be called Chapter Q, and the database location is in my Dropbox folder. So now when I hit OK, it's going to give me, and then I hit this little green arrow that says switch to this database. It's going to require me to restart Base Camp, in which case it closes and automatically restarts. And now I have a brand new, pristine, clean route database. And that any changes I make to this route database will then turn around and be shared or written out to Base Camp, which is then shared. Now, the nice thing you can do that as well is you can create something like this and share it among your chapters. So you could create your weekly route rides and create a Base Camp database and then turn around and share it with if you have 2 or 3 route leaders. And so then that way everybody has access to the official set of routes. That's just one really convenient way of being able to share routes among multiple people within your chapter. You could even create one that's a route library for your chapter or for things like that. The disadvantage is that everybody has to use Base Camp. Some people are not necessarily going to care for using Base Camp, but it's an option. Okay. So now the other part about this that I want to talk about too is just organizational. Inside of your library, you can create different lists in here. And it's basically, you can think of them as folders. But I'm going to create a new list here that's called training routes. But you could create lists for any classification you want. You can create a one list per route if you wanted to. It depends on how many different waypoints and endpoints, or you could create a folder that contains all the routes for a given weekend. It's a good way to organize things. Okay, hang on a sec. So now the next thing I want to talk about as well is activity profiles. This is one of those things where it's subtle, but it's worth covering. If you go into Edit, Options, and then go to Activity Profiles, Basecamp by default comes with a couple of base profiles that are there, that comes with it. Driving and motorcycling are obviously the most obvious to our needs. But of course, if you want to take your motorcycle off-road, then there's always the walking and hiking. Goldwings don't really go off-road too well, but give it a shot. Now, the one thing I want to kind of comment on is that the names of the routes are interesting, but the routing options here are the ones that are where you can set them. But one thing I want you to keep in mind is that these route options are specific to Basecamp only. I want to talk a little bit about routes in general and the way that they're stored. So routes are the way that they render on the screen, or the way they render on your motorcycle, are very specific to the routing engine that is in wherever you're looking at that route. So in Basecamp's perspective, when you talk about these routing options apply to it when you're looking at routes in Basecamp. When you store a route, all it does is store GPS points. So a typical route that has a starting and ending, the only thing that it stores is the GPS coordinate of the start and the GPS coordinate of the end, and that's it. Everything else in between those two is completely driven by the device in which you are viewing the route on. So if we're viewing the route on Basecamp, it's driven by these profiles. If you're looking at it on your Goldwing, like I have, my Goldwing has the built-in GPS. And so there it's going to use its version of routing preferences. And so we're going to talk a little bit about it, how to make it coerce it to go where you want to go instead of going where it wants to go. But the nice thing about this too is that you can use this as a starting point. You know, so the difference between driving and motorcycling is that it avoids interstates and unpaved roads, and you're looking for narrow roads and U-turns and ferries and roundabouts and all this kind of stuff, and stuff that you may not necessarily want. So that's a little bit about routes. So the next topic that I'm going to talk about is search. I will blatantly say that search inside of Basecamp is terrible. It's not just bad, it's terrible. And so I'm going to show you a little bit of a trick to get around that and to make the searching useful inside of Basecamp. Well, not searching itself useful, but it's going to make it so you can search and find stuff inside Basecamp easier. So one of the things that the route that I'm going to play with today is going to be, it's going to start from the Chapter Q ride point. Now the Chapter Q ride point, the address of that particular thing, it's a high V up in Maple Grove. And it's a relatively newly built high V. So I'm going to put the address in here and search. And what's going to happen is it's searching for 18755 70th Way North. And you can see by the results that this address does not show up anywhere. It doesn't show up anything. It can't find this address. It's just, it just doesn't find them. It just doesn't work. So here's the tip that is the one that I can provide that works well. If you go to Google Maps, bring up Google Maps, and I'm going to put in the address that I want to search for in Google Maps, and it brings me right down to exactly where I want to be. Here's the high V, and we're going to go, here's the high V gas station that's here. And even the picture shows that it's not even built yet. And so it's a relatively new thing. When you're in Google Maps, you can right click on any of these pointers and say, what's here? What that's going to do is it's going to show you down here the GPS location of that particular point. But the irritating thing is that you can't really get that GPS. You can't like click on this thing and copy it and do what you need to do. But here's the trick. Up here in the URL, right here is the GPS coordinates. And you can highlight the GPS coordinates up in the address bar and copy it to the clipboard. So now you have the GPS coordinates for that particular location that you're looking for. And now I'm going to go back to Basecamp, and I'm going to go to Find, Locate Coordinates. And obviously you can also see it's a Control-T to get you there. And then I'm going to paste the GPS coordinates in right there. And then I'm going to say create waypoint. So now it created this waypoint right here, directly, right exactly where I wanted it to be. And if I do this, you'll see that it creates that waypoint right where I needed it to be. And then of course you can, this is not a really nice, a nice notation. So you can always go into the details and say, IV and make it make it a gas station plus. And so now you were able to find a point in Basecamp by using Google Maps. It works pretty slick from that perspective because Google Maps works really well. You know, and again, it's a way to get around the deficiencies of the search inside of Basecamp specifically. And that's, I think, is one of the biggest things that is fun, most people find frustrating. Well, the second biggest that they find frustrating inside of Basecamp is being able to find things correctly. And this makes it so that that way you can use another tool that does it really, really well and make use of it here in Basecamp. There's another option as well that's the little less obvious, which is that you can take and use the new waypoint pointer tool and just point it someplace at a new waypoint and then edit that waypoint and paste in your position right there, and it'll do the same thing as doing what you did before. So now I'll have two waypoints at the, two waypoints at the same spot, which will be right in here. Now, one thing that's another thing that Basecamp really doesn't necessarily do well is keeping track of what tool you're using at this particular time. So if you notice, there's all these tools up here. And these are the pointer tools. So if you pick a zoom tool, you can highlight down to a particular spot. If you pick a ruler, it'll tell you how far it is to go from there to there. Now it's well, it's a bad example because I'm kind of too close. Let's go back out to here. And if we take this thing and go from, how far is it from St. Cloud to Minnetonka? You know, and you can see it's 59.3 miles, 58. You can then create all kinds of weird things to figure out how far things are. But I find that a little, you can use that. The one thing that I do use that for is if I'm doing a multi-day ride and I want to figure out that I want to basically keep it to 400 miles a day. And so if I want to take, and let's go back here, say we want to drive from Minneapolis down to Arkansas. So what you can do is start here and kind of go and say, hey, I only want to go 400 miles a day. And so you find out where 400 miles takes you to. And then that can give you an idea of where to look for a hotel for that night. Things like that. That's the only thing I can find useful for the ruler. And then obviously the new waypoint is you can actually click anywhere and put in a waypoint. I find this a little less useful, but the one thing I want to stress here is that when you use all these other tools and then you want to take and like move the map a little bit, you got to make sure to always put it back to the hand. It's one of those things that I forget once in a while. And so you've got to put it back to the hand in order to be able to move the map around. So that's finding waypoints. And the interesting thing, the one thing that I do find like interesting is that the search, you can also put in names. So there's a lion in Lion's Tap in Minnesota, and then it actually finds Lion's Tap. You can try searching for things and see it seems to work by name, sometimes more than by address, but it's kind of a crapshoot again, and the search is kind of not necessarily good. So, but we're going to take, and actually, this is where we're going to make our route to. So I'm going to use it as a route as an example. We're going to go from the Chapter Q ride point to Lion's Tap. And so that's where we're going to start from today. And so I'm going to create a route. And so I'm going to pick the route creation tool. And then I'm going to go from the Hy-Vee to Lines tab. And I'm going to use motorcycle as my activity. So now it creates this particular, creates the route for me. And the one thing that's always kind of nice is that you can always take a route and right click it and say show on map. And it'll automatically zoom you in so that you see the whole route. So one thing to keep in mind here, and again, this will be a good demonstration of this, is that I picked the motorcycling route. And so you'll see it takes me down through some of the interesting parts. But if I change it to driving, then it takes me down the interstate. If you took this route exactly like it sits and put it on your bike, your Garmin or your motorcycle, it would then route based on the parameters you have on your particular device. So for me, because of the way that I have the built-in GPS, it would take me right down the interstate. Not where I wanted to go. It's not where any of us wants to go. But so now we want to talk about how do we make it do the things that we want it to do. So you have the route that's here, and you'll notice that my pointer is a pencil. That's because I'm still on the route tool. So I use the route tool to build this base route that put in my starting and ending point, and it leaves it on my route tool. So if I were to take and start doing stuff here, it would start drawing another route. So you have to remember to put it back to the hand. And that I do the most, is that I forget to change the dumb pointer back to where I want to do. And to do all the kind of things that we want to do next, we want to be in this pan tool. And so now the next thing to do, or the next thing I generally do is like I want to create some gross changes, some significant, like I don't want to go down this way. I want to go through Lake Minnetonka. So here's the other thing that is kind of frustrating, but once you learn how to do it, it's relatively easy. And you can't see me doing this, but if I've got the route highlighted, if I hold down alternate on the keyboard, and then I grab the route and click on it, you'll notice that it's got the little route pointer with the little plus next to it. Now I can drag the route and drop it someplace over here. And now it reroutes me. And if we look at the route itself, it adds a shaping point for where I dropped it. So shaping points are different than waypoints. Waypoints are places where you stop. Shaping points are just things to make the route go where you want it to go. And so I'm going to take and just do some gross changes here. I'm going to go and say I want it to go kind of this that direction over there, and maybe someplace through here. And then, yeah, we'll let's just see what goes through over in here. Okay, so now you can see it kind of looks kind of funky. And now you need to get into the kind of the making the details of exactly what you want it to do. One thing with Base Camp is what it shows on the maps depends on the zoom level. So as I zoom in onto this map, at some point you'll start seeing all the county highways show up. Whereas one step out, they all disappear. There is a point where they show it. And this is going to be true for any Garmin device. It's the way that Garmin makes their maps, is that they create a specific map for a different zoom level. And so if you go in further, then you'll see more detail. But generally for us and for things that we wanted to do, if you get it to show the county roads, you know, it's pretty much a good thing, a good place to start. And so now you can see that I got this shaping point out here, in the middle of a field. Now, nobody's going to want to drive out there. The GPS will lead you to go out there, but most people won't want to. So again, I want to move this shaping point. And so just like I did when I was moving the route, you can move a shaping point by holding down the alternate key, clicking on that point, and then moving that point to where you want it to be. So again, alternate, left click, drag. And so you can see that I'm going to take, in this particular case, I don't want to go down this way. I'm going to hold down the alternate key. I'm going to drag the route and put it over here. So then now it comes over here and comes down this road. One thing I would also recommend is that when you're creating these shaping points, the good thing is to put a shaping point just after you've made a turn. So you'll notice that I put this shaping point just after making this left-hand turn. I could have put it just before making the turn or anywhere else, but the nice thing is if you put it just after making a turn, then it will guarantee that you make that turn, and then it generally works better to go where you want it to go. And so now I'm going to go down and just shape exactly where I want the route to go. And so again, you can see I got a shaping point here that's in the wrong spot. So I'm going to hold down the alternate, drag, and drop it right there. So it'll go down that road. Then I'm going to follow the route down. Going to go through Lake Minnetonka here, which is kind of nice. And then it's a good thing of this Excelsior here, this route, it makes it so you just drive over Highway 7. You don't have to hit a stoplight. I know that from experience, not from looking at the map. And now here again, I've got a shaping point that's just off in the middle of nowhere. So I'm going to drag it and drop it over here. And now it's going to go down the road that I want it to go. And I'm like, hey, this has been pretty bad. It's pretty good. But now the thing that I want to point out here is that if we're looking at this particular aspect of it, and I take the route, actually what I'll do is I'm going to show on the map, and you'll see where the route goes. But if I go here and change this from motorcycling back to driving, you will see pieces of the route move. Down in here especially, because I didn't have any shaping points to force me to go down that one road that had a lot of twisty. So now I'm going to put it back to motorcycling. It's going to recalculate. And now I know that I need to add some shaping points down in here to be able to get it to go where I want to go. So I'm going to go down here. Sorry if I'm moving a little quick. And so I'm going to just take and hold down the alternate key, grab the route, and then just take and move it and drop it back on the road there. Now I'm guaranteed to come down this road. And so now if I change the route again from motorcycling to driving, it should recalculate, but it should still take me down that road. Now you'll notice that it changed the road over here as well. So if I change it back to motorcycling, you'll see that it shifts it back over and comes down Highway 101. So you do a click and drag and you drop it over here. And now this is exactly one of the things that I want to point out. This is extremely irritating. Why did it create this loop? So the reason that it created that loop is because you happen to drop the waypoint on the wrong side of a divided highway. You would think that it could figure it out, but you'll notice when I zoom in far enough, I dropped the waypoint on the northbound version of the road, not the southbound version of the road. And so in order to hit the waypoint, it takes you down here, you do a U-turn, you go back up the northbound part of the road, and then you come up and do a U-turn again, and then you come back here and keep going. extremely weird and frustrating. And when you see your route do kind of weird things like this, then you need to look into the details. And also, I would highly recommend getting down to this level of detail and just kind of run through your route to make sure that you don't have this happen. So now I'm going to hit alternate, click on this waypoint, and I'm going to drag it over to the southbound side of the road. And now it fixes it. And you get rid of that weird point. If you happen to drop a waypoint or a shaping point on the wrong side of the highway, then it's going to do this kind of weird stuff. And it's something that that when you get down to following your route at this level is where you'll see it. Now, is it feasible if you're going on a 400-mile route to get down to this level? It may not be, but if you can pretty quickly scroll through most of your route and see if there's anything where this is happening. Okay, so that's shaping points. But now here's the other interesting thing about shaping points. I'm going to take and in my list here, I'm going to right click on this shaping point and say show on the map. It's going to take you to the maximum amount of zoom for that shaping point. If you notice on this shaping point, the shaping point is about 50 feet off the highway. And different GPSs are going to use this differently. One thing that I found very interesting is with my built-in GPS on my Goldwing, the first version of the software that came with that, it would come along, and if your point was off the highway like this, it would say, turn left to get to this point. And then you would go past it, and it would say, make a legal U-turn to get past to this point. And then it would keep on going, make a legal U-turn to get back to this point. It wouldn't give up. And now the current version of it does finally give up. And it would ignore this, and it would work just fine. But what I end up doing is, again, I can move that shaping point by holding down the alternate key and dragging it and dropping it in the middle of the highway. And so then I actually go through all of my shaping points and look at them all. Now, so I can see this one here is off the highway. So I can drag it and drop it and put it back onto the road. And so if you go and down to the level of detail on these shaping points, it will make your route much cleaner. And it'll transport to multiple devices better. If you're creating routes for your chapter and then you're going to share those routes to other people in the chapter, the better that you make your shaping points on roads and in good places where it'll actually find it, it's going to be the better that they will translate to multiple devices. Because obviously if you're going to create a route library and you're going to share it with people, people are going to have versions of GPSs that are going to vary very widely. And so you want to make sure to have these things as good as you can get them. Like even this one, it's only off by a little bit, but it only takes a second just to move it back and put it right down in the center of the road. So if I go here, move this guy. And so now I've got all of my shaping points where I want them. I've got the map, the route goes, and if I were to change, now if I were to change it from motorcycling to driving, it still shifts. But you can go and you can see where it shifts, and you can change it or leave it the way it is, but moving between, and if you wanted to, you can even go to mountaineering, and see how the route changes when you mountaineer. It's a little, if you feel like walking, that works well. So those are the, and so then we also talk about what's the difference between a route and a track? And I can tell you that the difference is going to depend a lot on, effectively what happens is, you can see this route is here. You have the ability to create a track from this route. So if I say create track, what it does is you can see all of these dots on here. Every one of these dots is a GPS point on that route. And you can see it created a route that has 644 shaping points. Well, that guarantees that whatever device you put this particular route on, it's going to go exactly where you told it to do. It's going to have a lot of shaping points on it, and it's going to take, and that's the kind of the difference between a route and a track, is that the track is a much, it has a lot more finer grained set of GPS coordinates in there. And so you're guaranteed to go exactly where you said you're going to go. So it makes it so even if you don't like, even if you wanted to not go through the hassle of, you changed it to the motorcycle and it's going exactly where you want to, then what you can do is say create a track, and it'll then automatically do this thing for you. And then in your list of things, you'll have one that shows as a route and one that shows as a track. And so you'll have both of them. And so you can then choose which one you're going to put on your device. Sometimes it works really well, especially if you're going down a dirt road, where your GPS would normally avoid dirt roads, and you want it to go down this dirt road just because it's the best. If you're driving in southern Minnesota and you don't want to drive on the interstate, then you're forced to go down some dirt roads. That's just life. And so sometimes you can make that choice. Okay, then the other part that I wanted to kind of talk about as well is transferring the route to your device. Now, I happen to have a standard Garmin GPS connected in here, but whatever device you have connected onto your computer, connected to your computer, will show up here. You can always highlight a route and then do device, send to device, and then select a device. You could actually send the entire folder also to your device as well. And so then when you do that, it'll ask for, which device do you want to send it to? And you say, okay. And so now it'll actually transfer that route to your device. So if you actually look at your device, it'll show all of the data that I just transferred to it. So now it's on your device. You'll still have to import the route on your device as well. So especially with like the Zoom, or like I have to on my built-in, is that I take the memory chip that I use and I put it in, and I have to import the route. On a Zumo, you also have to import the route. And I'm not going to actually go through that because I'm not going to show it up on the camera, but you still have to, even though you transfer the route to your device, you still have to import the route on your device. Seems kind of strange that it's on the device and you got to put it there twice, but you do still have to do that. And that's the last thing that I wanted to kind of talk about. Oh, I got one more thing to talk about. Sorry, because this is why I have notes. So this particular route that we have on here, and I'm going to run this route, and I'm going to start it. We're going to run this route on next Wednesday, this coming up Wednesday. So if you double click on a point, the starting point, and you say, I'm going to schedule my departure, and I'm going to schedule it for next Wednesday, and we're going to leave the ride point at 6:30 p.m. When I hit OK on here, what you'll see is it'll tell you the arrival time. It estimates that you're going to get to every route point along the, including the arrival at the end. So that can give you a good estimate of, you know, if I'm going to run this route as a dinner ride, this is going to get me there at almost 7:45 at night. That's too long a ride for a dinner ride because they close at 8 o'clock. It gives you, it's not going to be absolute. It's not going to be perfect. And it is not going to take, but it's a good estimate. Now, one thing that goes in to this time estimate is if you go to edit options and you go to routing, no, not routing, sorry. Dang it, it's got to be on here. Speed. So if you go to routing, and I'm going to go to motorcycling, and use the option down here that's called speed. You can actually customize what speed it uses as a miles per hour for each given road type. So for us, when we're doing a group ride, we're generally not moving at, we may be moving slower than the posted speed. And so you can actually change the mile per hour on different road types, and then that'll give you, may give you a better estimate on your time, because these are the values it uses in calculating that time. And so you can customize this as well. But again, this is only a feature inside of Base Camp, and it is not anything that will, when you translate the route to different spots, it won't. And if you've got one person that has different, you know, if you set the, you know, the interstate speeds to from 67 to 55, and then somebody else has it set to 67, then their times are going to be different. Okay, so that is the end, and I actually went longer than I really intended to, and I apologize, but I'm going to unmute everyone. And now, if you have any specific questions that I probably won't be able to answer, or you guys have some great intuition or great things you want to add, please contribute. We'll see if we can not run over each other too much, but because we got a fair number of people here.
Jim, hey, Jim, can you show that getting back on the road after you're not like a little arm going off the regular route?
Yep. So if I do this and show on map, and let's take this and let's move it so it's bad. Oops. So if I have a thing that looks like that.
Yep.
Yep. So I have a shaping point, and that's that little dot right there. And you hover over it, hold down the alternate key, drag it, and drop it back in the middle of the highway.
Hey, Jim. I'm on a Mac. There's no alternate key.
I believe that on the Mac it would be your control, or whatever the little thing is that looks like a figure 4.
Man, it's option.
Oh, there you go.
Okay.
I believe it's option, but I'm not 100% sure.
Yep. Okay. Thank you.
Hey, Jim, I've got a different, I get a different screen. The screen that you got there that shows Ivy, when I go to that screen, when I go to the, I open that to someplace or another here, I don't get all the options that you show. I'm trying to remember which one we were on.
Are you talking about this particular detail screen that I've got here?
that's another step. But the one before that, when you pick the, I can't remember which one it was here.
On the left-hand side of my screen
Okay.
here?
No, when you go up to device and options, edit, go to edit and then options. My screen is totally different than that. I've got it shows I'm driving like you got. Okay, but then I've got on general. You've got there. That's the screen that I have, and that's okay. And I can't change. It won't change to general.
What version of Base Camp are you using?
No, but I updated it yesterday. But now I did get it. It did go to general. But I don't know how. Okay. I don't know how it changed it, but I clicked on it. And it's got all those choices.
Okay.
So if I okay, well that was I see where it's going, but I don't know why it doesn't change for me. Now I got the general on, but when I click on routing, you see there?
I can't see your screen.
I know,
Okay.
but I'm looking at your screen. Look on activity profile with the little car. There. Okay, you see yours is now highlighted on routing. Okay. See, now it went back. Okay.
Say, Bob,
Yeah.
you have external speakers or are you just listening with your headphones?
I'm listening on my headphones.
You have the speakers still on because we're getting feedback from you guys.
But
No, you gotta,
Bob?
yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Yep.
Yeah.
What I would say is, here's what I'm going to offer, is that for anybody on the call that wants to go on, do any kind of ask kind of one-on-one questions as well, I would be more than willing to do that. The nice thing is that there is a technology as well that we can do a Zoom call like this, and then you can share your screen, and then I can see what you're seeing a lot easier. And so just send me a message and say, hey, we want to set up a time, and I'd like to ask some specific questions, and we can definitely do that. And then that way we can both be kind of looking at one thing and even go through and do some practice stuff. I will definitely be more than willing to do that without anybody on this call. So.
Jim, have you had any issues with the GPS coordinates? I'll give you a very specific example. Planning a ride to the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, it includes stops at various waterfalls. Now, Base Camp does not do well with topographical locations as far as searching from what I've seen.
Oh, it's horrendous.
But in searching for where I wanted to be and approximately, looking at one of the waterfall sites, they gave me GPS coordinates. I go into Google, okay, those GPS coordinates match, so therefore I know they're accurate. If I transfer those GPS coordinates to Base Camp, it put me in the middle of Lake Superior.
Okay.
That's really
So
where I want to go with the Gold Wing.
Let's see if we can find one. So here's waterfalls in Michigan. Oh, hang on. I did it in the wrong spot. Sorry. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, let's go for Manganese Falls out here.
They're individual questions.
So we're going to go out here to Manganese Falls.
How do we get rid of routes?
And I'm going to hit right-click on Manganese Falls and say, what's here? Gives me the GPS coordinates. I grab the GPS coordinates from the URL. And now I'm going to go back to Base Camp and say, find, locate coordinates, paste them in here, and then I'm just going to say recenter. And you're right. It puts you right into the middle of the lake.
Have a nice swim.
But how close are you in the middle of the lake? Let's create a waypoint there just for fun. Is it anywhere close?
One that I had an issue with.
It's a lot of swimming.
Yeah, wow.
That's
Way out.
interesting. It's close because, well, no, well, yeah, it is.
It's close, but
No cigar.
and that happened to more than one of these. That if I was close, I mean, they using the GPS coordinates.
It's other than my,
Miles of a lot of them.
That's interesting. I had not experienced that. I would think GPS coordinates would be GPS coordinates. The good part about it is that and I've also ran into these too, where you go into so here's where it is, and so you can see that it's like right over in here, and so you can actually grab the weight drop point, and it's whoops. So that's weird that, so this is 28.328 degrees. And this one, oh, that's a double decimal. That's interesting. I had not seen that.
And it happened to more than one of them. And what you just did is exactly what I ended up doing to route it. Was finding it on Google Maps, then kind of following the roads on Base Camp until I got what appeared to be the same topographical features and corners in the roads, and dropped a waypoint there, and hoping that I'm close enough that I'll be able to find it.
Interesting. Well, thank you. That one is a new one for me.
Now,
Jim,
question for you, Jim. Wisconsin. If you are using a Nuvi on your Goldwing and someone else has done the routes and misdropped, one off a ways, if you tap the top bar where it says continue to such and such a road and then turn, if you just tap that, it'll show you where you are, and you can go down it a few notches, and you'll find the next waypoint. And if you tap go on that, it'll take you right to it. So you flow by those misplaced off the road drops.
Yep. Me, I have the interesting problem is that because I have the built-in GPS, you cannot touch anything while you're riding. So in order for, so that the third party, the separate ones allow you to do that. That is true. And again, I would kind of say that I would not recommend doing that while you're driving. But if you do pull over, you can actually probably get it better. But that is good that they have a way to get around them. Thank you.
The older Garmin's used to have a return to route, and they don't have that anymore. So that was a one tap, and it would just continue from where you were back to the route.
Okay.
What happens, Jim, if we're proceeding down a route and we come to a bridge out and we have to reroute? Will it get us back on track, or how do we deal with that?
Again, that's a particular feature of whatever GPS you happen to be running the route on, more than it is a feature. So, and it's going to vary depending on which GPS you have. And again, because I don't own a Zumo, or some of those, like I said, I have mostly have the experience with the built-in one. And generally, they try to get you back. What'll happen most of the times is if you deviate, it'll try to get you back to the next shaping point as much as possible.
Okay.
And again, if you follow the detour, then it should get you back to the next shaping point. If you have enough shaping points, then it should get you back to your route as quickly as you possibly can. Had that happen 2 weeks ago. I drove down to Northfield, and there's a Highway 21. There's a bridge out in down that direction, And so I ended up having to drive around it, and my GPS I was in my pickup truck at that time, didn't do well.
Jim,
Yes.
this is Joanne Carlson. I kind of, apologies, came in a little bit. You've been started for a few minutes. For those of us who are kind of newer to the base camp, can you just kind of break it down into the major steps that you showed us, like starting from where you create the file, just, not real generally as a summary?
Yep. And since Bob, we are recording this session as well. So you can always go, once we post this to YouTube, you'll always be able to go back and review it and pause it and look at those kinds of things as well. So that'll be a good help as well. And I think that would probably work better than going back through the beginnings.
That's
Also,
fine. I
Jim-
didn't know you were recording it. That's great.
It's okay.
Jim also said you can do a one-on-one on Zoom, which you could show your screen.
Yep.
Joanne, and then he could say, well, click this button. It might be slightly different if you use an older version and stuff.
Exactly. So yeah, if you wanted to go and have a one-on-one session, let's set up your own route database that you can share. Then we can talk specifically about, which cloud service you're actually going to use and how to share in that particular cloud service and stuff like that as well.
Thank you, because I kind of have to come in and help him operate. And so that's how I ended up in the middle of this whole discussion.
I understand. And I'm not going to say anything more.
Smart man.
I got a question, Jim.
Yes.
This is Alan. I didn't introduce myself at the beginning. I'm a visitor, as my name says. I'm a first-time Goldwing owner. I just bought a new 2020 this week.
Congratulations.
Loving it so far. It's a Tour DCT. I've had very little luck importing or exporting tracks from the built-in GPS. I've got a flash drive in the plugged in the compartment, but it doesn't recognize it. It recognizes to play music from it, but not to save or import. It just doesn't allow it. Any idea what does it have to be a special folder or any hints?
I'm going to defer this to someone who actually I have a 2012.
Okay.
And so in my 2012, the GPS unit, there is actually an SD card that is used specifically for importing. And so I take that SD card and I put it in my computer, and it shows up exactly like this device here shows up. And so, when you're putting a route on the device, it has to go in a very specific folder so that it knows how to import.
Right, yeah.
Now, does anyone have a 2012 with the GPS that they've imported
Yeah.
route?
Got to ask Alan a question.
Sure.
You said you had the 220 and you put in a, would you call it a
USB flash drive?
Oh, so you don't have as Jim has, I have the same one as Jim. You don't have a SD drive you put in there, right?
It's just a USB, like it's meant for like charging a phone or whatever. It's just a regular USB. It looks like what you'd have on your computer.
Yeah, we have that on ours too, but that's just for playing music. I would suggest I remember when we were formatting our flash drives, Jim, when we first did it, I couldn't get a map on there either, but it had to be in a special folder called Garmin.
Yeah.
And your Garmin, it had to be under GPS. So if it was not under GPS, it would not look for it. So I don't know if that's a hint or not, but you might ask somebody else. I don't have a 2020, so I can't say anything, or even an 18 or 19.
Yeah.
Does anybody on the call have a 18 or 19 or 20 that they've put routes onto?
I'm the guinea pig.
So I can tell you that yes, it could be that if you create a thumb drive that has the right format, and Mr. Hicks is right. There's a Garmin folder, and inside the Garmin folder, there's going to be external data, and then no, not external data. Where is it?
It's GPS. Mine is GPX.
Yep. And then there we go. And so if you create it, there should be in the manual that tells you how to format the drive for the specific folder structure that you need
Okay.
in order for it to be able to look for it. And I'll bet you that, I can't remember, is it a Garmin, or did Garmin get it into the newer ones?
No, well, the guy at the IMS said, yes, it's a Garmin, but if you look at it real closely, it's actually a Harman, which nobody's ever heard of. So it's not great. I actually have, I'm using that, but I'm also actually using, I got a new Zumo XT. I'm also using, and I'm much more excited about.
Yeah.
But I also want to use it, the internal one as well.
Yeah, the nice thing about the internal one is that it routes through the audio system, and you get the nice turn by turn through your heads, the audio system and things like that.
Yeah.
Formatting
was definitely an issue. I got a brand new flash drive, and it came formatted as exFAT format, and it wouldn't read the music I put on there. When I reformatted it as NTFS and put the music on there, it reads that just fine.
Yeah.
So for some reason, I think the folder structure is a key point, and I think I may not have tried that exact structure you're talking about, because I have used that in other aspects, like the memory card on Zumos. So I'll try that again.
Yep. And the good thing is if you look at your Zumo, because it'll have the structure that it's looking for, you can mimic it.
Yes.
Maybe.
I will try that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. I would like to, like I said, if anybody else has any specific questions, you can send me an email. If you don't have my email address, it's on the chapter. It's on just about every chapter's website. If not, you can also, it's listed on the district website as well. Send me,
chapter for Minnesota and the district of Minnesota.
Yep.
For Jim, for folks that may not be in our district or chapters.
I apologize. Thank you very much for that correction. I wasn't thinking about that.
No problem.
And I am so happy that there's so many people that decided to join and participate in this particular thing. That shows is at least something that people found useful. And so I'll see if I can come up with anything else that might be useful as well. I suppose we can stop recording now.
Jim, thanks very much for putting this together for us.
Yes, thank you.
You're very welcome. And then what we'll do is that we'll get it, and Bob, I'm assuming that you'll get it out on YouTube and then send it in an update.
I'm trying to, hopefully I did it right. If not, well, you'll have to do it again, Jim.
Yep.
But we'll see what happens.
Yep.
Well, it's the first time I tried recording something. I thought I'd give it a shot. So.
Yeah. Nope. And I was planning on doing that as well. So.
It says pause. It says pause and stop recording. So I'm assuming, you know what's happening when you assume that it is recording. So.
Yep. And
I may not dump it to my files until after we're done here. So.
Yeah. And I can see the little recording icon on my display.
Oh yeah, there you go. I see it now.
Well, thank you all very much for joining, and I'm